So normally I show a PowerPoint as I go over that, but today I wasn't going to do that because the bulk of what I'm going to be going over is the worksheet that I use in helping people kind of sort out what's going on with them and how they can confront the shadows of shame that are hijacking their lives, as well as what they can then do to start telling the truth about them. So I felt like, excuse me, I've been coughing for a couple of days now, and so I apologize for that. But I felt like it would probably be more helpful to just walk through the worksheet. The worksheet is available for download. We have a men's group on Fridays where we give people an opportunity to walk through this worksheet in the men's group, but anybody can use it, whether you are a person struggling with addiction or whether you are the partner, betrayed partner. You can use it and you can download it on Fridays. My group is there. You can get the link to the worksheet. So that's where it's found. And I thought it would just probably be better just to go over that and explain how it is and give a little bit of background. And then Scott, if you have questions during it and you want to jump in and ask me, that would be awesome. And if other people have questions, I'm trying to pay attention to all the different screens at the same time. So maybe Scott can manage that part for me, and then we'll
do.
Go. Good. All right. So let me share my screen. Okay. All right. So you should be able to see the finding piece worksheet that's there. And these are really tiny columns. If you were going to do it, if you were really going to use the worksheet the way it's intended, I would probably just get a piece of paper for each one of the columns, but it's up to you how you work it. But the whole finding piece theory is that we've all been wounded. We've all had things that have happened to us that cause us pain, and Scott mentioned that these attachment wounds are loss, rejection, abandonment, neglect, betrayal, and abuse. And I'm in recovery myself, and as I was trying to figure out why was I reacting in certain ways, and why was I tending to act out in certain ways, and after I was able to be in recovery for a while, I was still very, very angry. And I was thinking, well, what is going on with me? Why am I so angry and upset? I was very depressed. I was trying to be able to figure that out. And over the course of trying to just, for me to be able to understand it, I was stumbling on all kinds of other people's work, like Sue Johnson's work, Brene Brown's work, other people's work that as I was looking at, I was taking a little bit from here and a little bit from here and a little bit from there and putting it all in a way that made sense for me. And it starts out with the attachment wounds that we just talked about. And they're like sunburns. And so when somebody says something or somebody does something, it can bump up against one of those wounds and it will cause us pain. There will be immediate pain. And just like the fight or flight response, we'll either want to pull away from that pain or we're going to want to fight against that pain, but there's some kind of a reaction to it. And if we can walk ourselves through what's actually going on, figure out how shame maybe is showing up in all of this, then it helps me at least, and the guys that I've walked it through with on the Friday class, it's helped them become very clear about what's going on and what's really under the surface and how we can get those needs met. So the first column starts with facts. And so how it works is you think of an event that has smacked up against one of your wounds, loss, rejection, excuse me, loss, rejection, abandonment, neglect, betrayal, something that has happened that has smacked up against that. And then we're going to write that down in the facts section. And what we're going to look for specifically is what specifically happened. we're going to write down the events as if I were watching it on a camera or if I were hearing it. So I'll give you an example. My son is supposed to be going on a scout camping trip this weekend, and fathers are welcome. And I keep saying that I'm going to go, and he says, well, you don't have to go, Dad. You don't have to go. Like, really, you don't have to go, Dad. And so the facts are, my son is saying, I don't, he's saying, you don't have to go, Dad. That is the literal facts. Now, I could come up with a story and say, well, my son doesn't want me to go or whatever, but I'm just putting in this column what actually was said or what actually happened. And usually in this column, it's like 1 or 2 sentences. There's not a lot. There's not a lot of facts there's just not a lot. So if you have if you have a paragraph in this column, chances are you are telling a story. You are not putting down the facts. We just want the facts. What happened? So the facts, and then when we go to the next column is, okay, what are the wounds that is being stirred up for me, and what is the negative core belief? And what I've discovered as I've been doing this for 20 years is it's not the wound that is really causing us the problems. It's what we end up believing about ourselves as a result that causes the problem. But if I can identify what the wound is, then that helps direct me as to how I can do the right kind of wound care. And I can start to tend to that wound. And I can also identify, oh my goodness, what is the negative core belief as well. So I've used the analogy that there's a wound and then there's a core belief that is connected to that wound. And when the wound is hit, the core belief lights up as well. So in this situation, oh my goodness. In this situation, for me, for example, what was the wound? Well, the wound is rejection. I am so sorry. I'm going to put one of these in my mouth and try. My drama teacher will be really upset with me because you're not supposed to talk with something in your mouth, but oh well.
I've had the cough for 2 months, so
oh my
I hope
gosh.
it goes away faster.
Yes, it's so gross. Okay, anyways, so the wound for me in this situation is definitely rejection. It is a rejection wound, and the core belief is that I'm not wanted. And that wound of rejection for me has been around since I was a little kid, and the negative core belief has been around just as long, that I'm not wanted. So I'm just writing it down. What wound was stirred up for me and what's the negative core belief? Okay, so I got that. Almost instantaneously, as soon as that happens, if I don't have an intervention and start doing wound care at that moment, then shame is going to show up. And I personified shame into 6 different characters because it helps me be able to combat them a little bit better. I just had a client this morning whose impotent one is really, really loud. And for 30 years, she's believed that the impotent one was her. And I'll explain what the impotent one is in a minute, but she believed that the impotent one was her. So that was her voice. And we were able to help her see that, no, that is not you. You are a person who's worthy of love and belonging and value, but your impotent one has continued to try and convince you that you're powerless, that you can't. So in this column, we start to identify, well, which shame shadows have shown up and what are they saying to me? Hopefully, not all 6 shadows show up for you, because that can be very overwhelming. I've had clients who all 6 have kind of ganged up on them at the same time, and that can be overwhelming. It's usually 1 or 2, sometimes 3. And so I'll go over them. I know I've covered them in past webinars, so if you want to go back and review that, you can also look at that. But I'm so sorry. But the biggest one that most people connect with is the judge. It's that inner critic in your head that tells you that you're not doing it right, and it's demanding perfection, telling you that you're not doing it right. What's wrong with you? Why are you doing it that way? You shouldn't have done it that way. If you're using the word should a lot, that's an indication that the judge is the one that's talking to you. There's a lot of shoulds and trying to tell you that you're doing it wrong and you need to try harder. And the interesting thing with the judge is that it sets this level of perfection, this standard. And then if you actually meet that level, it will move it. It will move it over here, it will move it over here. So it's always a moving target. You can never satisfy the judge. The judge will never be happy. It will always find something to pick on you about, always find something to tell you that you're not doing enough with. So just kind of know that. The impotent one is the voice of powerlessness. It says, you can't do this. I don't know why you're even bothering to try. It's never going to get any better. It's just, it's a defeatist message. Like, stop trying. Just accept that life is going to be horrible. It's awful. The politician shows up and the politician says, well, you are screwed up. You know, you got some problems, but you can't let anyone see that you have problems. You need to be seen as amazing so that people will like you, so that people will vote for you. So maybe you have a bunch of skeletons in the closet, but don't let anyone know that. Don't be vulnerable about that. Just put on a mask and make sure that everybody thinks that you are amazing. The rebel says, well, screw it, go do whatever you want, go act out, go have fun, who cares if it hurts anybody else, just do what you want to do and just enjoy your life, and who cares. The martyr says that your needs don't matter, that other people's needs matter more than yours. So as long as you are serving a purpose by making everybody else happy, then at least you can find some uh, joy in life, because at least somebody else is happy at your expense. And then the last one, which is a little bit different than the others, is the royal, which basically tells you that you're better than everybody else, that you're entitled, that you deserve. All 6 shadows of shame do the same thing, though. They they hijack connection. They create an environment where your wounds can't heal, because as long as that shame is showing up, you can't be seen. And if you can't be seen, then people can't actually love on you and show you unconditional love. And it's hard for you to even be compassionate to yourself. And so you can't be seen, and therefore you can't be loved. And so that just exacerbates the shadows of shame that says, well, there's something wrong with you and that you're not worthy of love and belonging. So it's in this column, we're looking at who's out, who showed up for me, what are they saying? And what I found to be really, really helpful in this column in particular is I'm going to write out what the shadows are saying in second person. Normally when we're writing in a journal, we're using first person, which is I, me, my, but in this column, we're going to write down what the shadows are saying in second person. So for example, this morning, with my client, she was writing out in second person all the things that she's hearing the impotent one saying to her, such as, you are never going to amount to anything, you are never going to be enough, you should stop trying. So we're using the word you a lot. And why do we do that? It helps us be able to separate ourselves from the shadow. We're able to stand back a little bit from the shadows of shame. And then we're in a much better position to even have a dialogue with the shadow of shame. I can say, you know, I don't believe that that's true. I pushed a button. Did I do something?
No, you're good.
Okay. But it's helping us be able to create some kind of distance. I can step back from the shadow of shame a little bit and be able to interact in a different way than normally I was able to do, which then gives me some power and some resilience over the shame stories. I can start to challenge them and start to ask myself, well, is that really true? Is it completely true? If I don't figure out how to interact and challenge those shame shadows, then I'm going to go to the next level, which is the numbing behaviors. I'm going to start engaging in protective or numbing behaviors to try and contain my pain. My pain, my wounds hurt really bad, so I'm going to engage in some kind of a numbing or protective behavior to try and deal with that. So in the case of my son, I could, a numbing or protective behavior is I could get mad and say, well, I could force him and say, well, I'm going with you no matter what. You're just going to have to deal with it. I could angry and just kind of throw a fit and say, well, I'm fine. I'm not going then. You just have fun with yourself. And I could totally do that. So what numbing behaviors am I using or am I tempted to use? I could say, well, fine, I'll just go act out. I'll go numb in one way or another. It's important to just kind of take a look at, okay, what kind of numbing behaviors are showing up for me? And then if I continue on that path, what am I going to feel? And I call them mutated emotions. So core emotions are anger, sadness, fear, and joy. And there's a couple of others that, like if you watch Inside Out, they have a couple of others, contempt, and there's a couple, but I'm just focusing on those four: fear, anger, sadness, and joy. A mutated emotion is that emotion has mutated into something darker. So sadness mutates into depression, anger mutates into resentment, fear mutates into anxiety. So what we're looking at is, okay, as I've been listening to these shadows of shame, how big are these emotions now? So if I were going to walk through that and I didn't recognize what was going on with my son, it's the moment that he would have said to me, well, you can stay home, Dad. I could have walked right through all of that and all of a sudden wanted to feel just despair and just feel hopeless. Like, well, I screwed up as a dad and he just doesn't love me and all of that. All of that could have happened within that column. So the worksheet kind of helps, the worksheet has helped me and helps other people kind of dissect maybe a conversation or a situation didn't turn out so well. We can use the worksheet to figure out what that was. We can also use the worksheet in the moment that we're being triggered so that we don't end up doing the numbing and mutated emotions. So then we go to the column of truth. What is the truth? If there was a person who was able to love you unconditionally, if there was a being who could love you unconditionally and spoke the truth to you all the time and never lied to you and did it in love and compassion, what would that message be? And so we're taking a look at what the shadows of shame are saying, and then the truth is the opposite of that. What is the truth? And if I can start to tell the truth, well, I'm not a bad dad. Maybe I've made some mistakes in my life that has made him maybe not want to hang out with me as much. Could be that he's 13 years old and just wants to hang out with his friends. That might have something to do with it. But I could start to look at the truth. And as I start to do that and say, well, I'm still worthy of love and belonging. I'm enough. I'm good. I'm wanted. There's a lot of other friends that I have who enjoy hanging out with me, even if my 13-year-old is not in a place where he can do that right now. I can start to tell the truth about that. And as I do that, it shines a light on the shadows of shame and they begin to become small. They're not as powerful. They're not as overwhelming. And then I move to the next column, which is, okay, so what is really underneath all of that? What is it that I'm really feeling? Well, in this moment, when my son said, well, Dad, you didn't have to go, what was I really feeling? Well, I was actually feeling sad because I want to hang out with my son. I want to have interaction with him. That was what I was really feeling. And what did I need? Well, I need connection. And I might not be able to get that with my son, but I know that I need connection. And I also know that I need some reassurance. The wound of rejection, the opposite of rejection is acceptance. So that helps me understand what it is that I need. Well, I need acceptance that I am okay, that I'm still loved, that I matter. So I've identified I'm sad and I need some acceptance. And so that moves me to the last column, which is choice. Now I have some choices. Where am I going to go get that acceptance? I can do it in really unhealthy ways. There's a lot of places that I could try to go to get acceptance that are unfulfilling and aren't aligned with my moral values. I also can come up, identify with some healthy choices. Where are some healthier places that I can go get that met? I can reach out to my buddies and say, hey, this is what my son has been saying. Have you had a son that's done that to you before? And I just need to hear that I'm good enough. I could practice self-compassion myself. I could and do some journaling for myself. I could choose to let my son know how much I love him and how much I want to hang out with him. There's a lot of choices that I could have in this column. And then I'm going to identify, okay, which one will best meet my needs in a healthy way? And then I'm going to go try and get that need. I'm going to try and pursue that choice. And as I do so, again, the shadows of shame kind of fall back into the shadows because they no longer have a job to do. They march out when my pain is activated, but as soon as I get that need met and that pain starts to diminish, they don't have a job to do anymore. And so they go hide in the shadows until the next time one of my wounds gets stirred up. So there, there you go.
Thank you, Troy. That is amazing. We've got a couple questions here. If anybody has questions or a situation in your own life that you want to bring up and maybe get some advice on, use the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen. I'm going to take our second question first, which is, where can I find the worksheet?
I'm going to get the link for you and put it right there.
Just pop it in the chat feature for everybody.
Yeah.
That would be
Does
great.
that work? Okay. Where you go to get that is if you go to the sexandrelationshiphealing.com and you click on the weekly webinars, and you scroll down all the way down to Friday, you'll see it's a men's group, but you'll see that there's a Reducing Shame, Building Resiliency, Practical Tools for Recovery live with me on Fridays at 9 a.m. And if you click on that link, you'll see join the session, and then right underneath that is the download the Finding Peace worksheet. So that's where you can get it. And like I said before, anybody can use it. You don't have to be an addict to use it. That just happens to be the men's group that we use the worksheet with. So that's where you get it.
Yeah, and this is great. I'm going to download it for myself. Tammy didn't tell me this was up there. I would have done it already. This is such a great way to work through. I mean, you said your son was doing that. You don't have to go, Dad. And I jumped into story.
Mm-hmm.
I was immediately making up the story that, I mean, I don't have a son, but if I did, and my response would have been exactly the same.
Yep.
I'd be like, oh my God, he doesn't love me. I'm a horrible person. He's dumping me for,
his friends.
Somebody else's dad who's much cooler, or
right.
All of that. Just awful. And really, he's just a 13-year-old kid who's doing what 13-year-old kids do. He's growing up and separating. So we have a question here. How do I learn to stop attributing the past meaning to what my husband has done? I have rejection and abandonment issues from childhood, and I'm severely triggered by his acting out behaviors.
So thank you so much for your courage in asking that question. I want to honor that for you. That's one of the interesting things about doing this work is that I realized that I had carried into my marriage the wounds of rejection and abandonment. They were they were there since I was born. Actually, I was adopted, so that feeling of being abandoned by my birth mother was there from the moment that I was born. So those wounds I carried into the marriage, and I didn't understand that I was carrying them into the marriage. I didn't even have a vocabulary to put into what was going on. And then because of those wounds of abandonment and rejection, when I became a teenager, I found sexual behaviors as a way of soothing that pain, which made it worse because then I felt like I was rejecting and abandoning myself. So it never really healed the wound, but it numbed it for a while. And so then when I brought that into my marriage, man, that really activated my wife's abandonment wound and her betrayal wound. And that that was really, really painful for her. So uh, what I know now is that she also came into the marriage with her own wounds that were very painful for her. And so she's not here, so I don't have permission to talk about her wounds. But um, what I said at the beginning is that when those wounds are created, especially when they're created when we're children, we don't have the cognitive ability to understand why those were happening. We don't understand why my dad is acting in a very aggressive, violent way towards my mom. I don't understand why the bullies are bullying me and picking on me. I don't understand why my birth mother chose to give me up for adoption. And so as a kid, none of that really makes sense. So the only thing that I can come up with, because I come from a very egocentric point of view as a child, I feel like the world revolves around me, is, well, it must be me. There must be something wrong with me. I'm not wanted. I'm not good enough. There's something wrong with me. And so that wound gets created, and then that negative core belief gets, I use the analogy, gets tattooed on your heart. And so now, every time that rejection or abandonment or betrayal wound gets smacked, that negative core belief lights up as well. And it makes it so easy for us to then take it so personally when the other person is behaving in a way that hurts, and think, well, it's because of me. I'm not enough. I'm flawed. I'm defective. And so then I get angry about that, and then I walk right through all those columns that we just talked about, not realizing that he's actually reacting to his own wounds. He's actually reacting to his own negative core beliefs, and he's engaging in his own numbing behaviors as a way of trying to work through those. And it really isn't about me. It really isn't about my wounds. Yes, it bumps up against them. I'm not trying to minimize that. It bumps up against them, but that's his journey. That's his stuff. Now I need to do some wound care for myself to figure out, okay, wow, that really hurts my rejection wound. What are the negative core beliefs that are coming up for me? What shadows of shame are yelling at me? And what's the truth about me? I'm enough. I matter. I belong. I'm worthy. Where can I get those needs met? Maybe I can't turn to my spouse right now because he's not entirely safe and hasn't built that safety back yet. So where else can I go that's in a healthy way to give me the reassurance and acceptance that I matter, that I belong, that I'm important? Where else can I go? So we asked that question. Did that help? Is it okay that I say their name or no?
No, we don't use people's names,
Okay.
but
Hopefully that helped.
yeah. Um, I loved your analogy earlier about a sunburn, because for me, I'm pasty. I get sunburned, and just thinking about a sunburn, not even having a sunburn, is enough to give me anxiety,
Mm-hmm.
because I know what it feels like. And then to have a sunburn, it's painful on its own, but then when somebody bumps against it, it's agony. Um, and I think attachment wounds are just like that. My attachment wounds, just thinking about them gets me up a little bit. I mean, I have some post-traumatic stress reactions
Mm-hmm.
in my childhood. And then, if it's really bubbling on the surface, it's painful. And then if somebody pokes it, oh my God.
Mm-hmm.
And for somebody who's in a relationship with a sex addict, I mean, whatever wounds you've got, they're going to be on the surface, and the addict's going to poke them, or any kind of an addict. And I really love the last three columns. What is the truth that an impartial, kind, empathetic person would tell me? I mean, I'm not a religious person, but I wrote down, what would Jesus say to me?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And then what are my core emotions and needs? And I just looked at that and thought, it's the exact opposite of my wound and core belief.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then I have a choice about what to do with that, and that gives me some power over the situation. Um, it's such a good process. Yeah.
Thank
I
you.
mean, yeah, you mentioned Sue Johnson and Brene and some other people, and it really kind of does distill all of their work into something that's useful for me. So thank you.
You're welcome.
We have another question here. And by the way, anybody with the question, please just use the Q&A feature. We are, somebody typed in, I thought the same thing. What would Jesus say to me? So there you go. How do I deal with my overwhelming shame as a betrayed partner? There's so much shaming language for staying with my sex addictive partner. How do I support my own decision to stay for now? That is such a common and huge question. So Troy, take it away.
No pressure. So if I'm understanding the question, is that how do I support my own decision to stay in the relationship for now and not leave? And so if that's what you mean, that's that. If I'm interpreting it right, that's how I'm going to answer it. If I'm interpreting it wrong, then you can go in and clarify that for me, and I will change it. But so what we do with that is we first of all, we take a look at which shadows of shame are showing up in your life. So we take a look at the judge. What is the judge saying? And oftentimes you'll get the judge echoed by your friends or family or whoever. You know, they're out there. Their shadows are also talking to them too. So it just kind of fuels it. But let's take a look at which shadows of shame are showing up for you. And so the judge is like, well, what's wrong with you? Why are you sticking around? You shouldn't do that. You should be stronger. What's wrong with you? Judge also may be saying, well, this is, you know, what, you're not perfect, you know, and all kinds of stuff that the judge is saying. So let's take a look at the judge. What is the judge saying? We take a look at, well, is there any martyr that's coming up in there and saying, well, you know, your needs don't matter. Only his needs matter, or only your children's needs matter. Your needs don't matter. So, you know, as long as everybody else is happy, whatever. And what we're doing is we're taking a look at what are those messages of shame that are being said to me. And once I'm able to be really clear about that, then I can move over to the truth column. And sometimes forget about the rest of the worksheet. I'll just put one column of what the shadow's saying and then one column about what the truth is saying. And in fact, that's what we did with the client earlier today. We just one column and one column. It's almost like there's a debate going back and forth. Well, this is what the shadow's saying. Well, what does God say? Or what does your loving person, Mr. Rogers, whatever, what does that person say? What does your shadow say? And it's almost like this, you're watching this debate going on and you're stepping apart from it. So you're able to look at it and you're like, whoa, that's a lie right there. That is a lie. And then we identify, well, what is it that I need right now? Well, I need some reassurance that even though it maybe doesn't make sense to anybody else in the world, my wound of rejection and betrayal is really strong, but I still feel like the right thing for me to do right now is to stay in this relationship and be patient and to work through and see if change happens. And I really don't want to disrupt my family. So that's what really feels right for me. That's what my truth says. So where can I get some reassurance that helps encourage me that it's okay for me to be in this place right now? Is there a support group that I can reach out to? Are there friends who are unconditionally loving and who are willing to listen and not just tell me what they think I should do? Are those people like that who can help validate that for me? And if I can reach out to them and get that connection from them, I will feel better about being able to be in my position until maybe I shift it. And maybe things will change and later on I decide, well, that's really no longer congruent with my value system, and I've decided I'm gonna go. But for now, this is what feels right for me, and my shadows are trying to hijack that. My shadows are trying to convince me that I'm doing something wrong. So let me call them out, figure out what the message is, and then start telling the truth, and then get my needs met in a healthy way.
Yeah, and there's if you have not picked up a copy of Rob Weiss's book, ProDependence, I strongly suggest you do so. He talks a lot about this in there, about how, after somebody's cheated, partners of addicts, partners who've been cheated on, you get so much external pressure telling you, he's an asshole, get out. Why are you doing this? Why are you staying? God, leave him. You can do better. All that stuff. And, it just discounts the fact that you love this person, you care about this person, you've built a life together, you have a home, you have kids, you have a dog and a cat and a car, and, whatever. You picked out the paint colors together. This means something. And all other people are going to do is see the bad when you still see the good. And I think what Troy was saying about, really looking through, which shame characters are speaking, and then finding the truth, what the truth is for you, is a great idea. There are definitely some support groups for betrayed partners on sexandrelationshiphealing.com. And on Fridays at 1:30, first and third week, Kim Buck hosts a ProDependence webinar, and then second and fourth week, I think it's Matt Wheeler hosts a ProDependence webinar. So definitely take advantage of that, because it's just a different language than the blaming and shaming of codependence. There's nothing wrong with you for wanting to stay with somebody you love and to help somebody you love and to care about. There's nothing pathologically wrong with you for loving somebody. So I just want to reiterate that. Send us some more questions, because we're caught up. Troy, I wanted to kind of, I'll just walk through some of my own messaging while we wait for some people to send in questions.
Sure.
I mean, I always, the messages I got in childhood were, you're better than everyone else, but you're not good enough. You can do anything you want as long as you let me do it for you, because you won't do it right. What you're thinking and feeling does not matter. When I'm thinking, and feeling does. I went to the doctor, a pediatrician, when I was, young, and I had a horrible fever, and the doctor said, "How are you feeling?" I said, "I feel like crap." And I got a really long lecture about when people ask how you're doing, you say, "I'm fine, thank you." And then, I'm a writer for a living. I've always been a writer from the time I was a kid. And, my college essay, my mother offered to type it up for me, and I found out she had written her own essay for me, and she sent that in because she wanted me to get in. I wrote something for the local newspaper, asked me to write something. She offered to type it up for me. These both happened right together. I didn't know she was doing this, and she wrote something else. And when I called her on it, she said, "Well, people are going to read this," and these messages still resonate with me today. And the little shame stories for me, are the judge and the martyr and the royal and the politician, and I don't really have the impetus, and then my addiction, it was all about the rebel, like, screw this,
right?
Enough. And that was how I escaped. And the pain of those messages. And somebody else might look at my childhood and say, "Oh, your mother was just being helpful," but I'm sorry, she just wasn't. And it still crops up. I'm so excited to have this worksheet. I write mostly for other people, so things go out with their byline, and every single time, if they want to change even one word, they're smacking the sunburn.
Yeah.
And I need to walk through this process. So yeah.
Yeah, it's definitely triggering those rejection wounds and stuff. Um, it's interesting. Like I said earlier, I was very angry. After I stopped the numbing behaviors with the addiction, I stopped that. The wound was still very raw. And I didn't recognize that. I didn't understand that. And so sometimes my wife was like, man, you were nicer when you were looking at porn. Um, and not that I want you to go back and do that, but you were a whole lot nicer. And why? Because my wounds kept being stirred up and smacked and rubbed, and I didn't have language to understand it. I didn't have the ability to be able to put words to it. And so at the time she was volunteering and was gone a lot. And in the process of being gone a lot, that was really stirring up my abandonment wound, and I didn't recognize it. And I was so angry with it and reacting in really unhealthy ways as a result. Then I started to do this work and I started to understand it a little bit better. And she decided to go back and get her master's degree last year. And so she was gone every night. And after about a month and a half of her being gone every night and doing homework, I was chill. And I was okay. And I was interacting with my kids and I wasn't angry. And I looked back and said, what in the heck is going on here? And I realized, oh, yeah, my rejection and abandonment wounds are being stirred up, but I'm actually getting those needs met in a lot more healthy ways. I've been reaching out to other people and talking to them and attending support groups and doing all kinds of stuff that I wasn't doing before. And so it didn't hurt so bad. I was able to hold space and help her as she's pursuing one of her dreams and not be angry. And it was almost like this aha moment for me of how powerful doing the wound care really works to help me behave in the way that I think is congruent with who I really am.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to putting this into action. Can you walk us entirely through the Boy Scout situation?
Sure.
Just walk us through the worksheet.
Sure. Okay, the facts. Let me share it again so you can see it. Let's see. Okay, the facts. The facts are that my son has a camping trip this weekend, and and fathers are invited. And he said to me, Dad, you really don't have to come. And another fact is I do have to come because I've been asked to be a guest speaker the following morning, so I will be there anyway, but that's another fact. So those are the facts. Not a lot of content, just pinpoint. The wound is rejection. The negative core belief is that I don't matter, that I'm not wanted. The shame story. The judge says, man, you suck as a parent. You've failed your son so much, and he doesn't even want to have anything to do with you. You've ruined his life, and you're going to have to invest a ton of money in therapy for him as he grows up because you suck as a parent. The impotent one says, there's nothing you can do about it. It's too late. Your son's 13 years old, and so, your relationship with him is ruined already. So I don't even know why you bother even trying to reach out to him anymore. Just give it up. The hero says, the rebel says, you know what? Fine. Let him go. Let him hang out with his friends and do whatever he wants. And you can just go get a hotel. You don't have to be camping in the freezing cold, and you can just show up the next morning and fine, let him go. You can just have fun with his friends. He doesn't want you, whatever. So those same stories in particular are the ones that are showing up. The numbing behavior. Well, the numbing behaviors that I was tempted to use was to be controlling and say, well, you know what, buddy, I'm going to go with you whether you like it or not, so just suck it up. Or to say, you know what, okay, you go and I'll just see you in the morning then. I'll just come out the next morning and just kind of avoid having that conversation whatsoever. So I either just try to control or I avoid. Those were my numbing behaviors. Mutated emotions. Uh, luckily, they didn't get there, but if they had gotten there, despair, resentment, bitterness, shame. What's the truth? The truth is that my son is 13 years old, and as is pretty common for kids his age, they really want to hang out with their friends more than they want to hang out with their dads. So it's pretty age appropriate what he's saying. The truth is my son does love me. He and I hang out and play and spend a lot of time together often throughout the week. We're doing stuff together. So the truth is that he does love me. The truth is that I have made mistakes as a dad, and some of those have lifelong consequences as a result, but I have improved and I am not a bad dad. I love my son and I know my son loves me. And the truth is that I do want to connect with my son, but I want to connect in a way that feels real for both of us. So that's the truth. What are my core emotions? Well, sadness and joy. So what do I need? If my wound is rejection and what I need is some acceptance. And I'm not gonna, that's what I need, acceptance. And I'm sad. So I need to be able to get maybe some comfort as well. So what are my choices? Well, my choices are, I'm not gonna turn to my 13-year-old and make him responsible for taking care of my feelings. I'm not gonna do that. That would be unhealthy. So but it doesn't mean that I don't need some reassurance. So where else can I get it? Well, as I often do, I have some dads that I'm connected with who are struggling with their teenage boys just as much as I am. And so I will call them on the phone or I'll do a Marco Polo with them and say, hey, this is what's going on. I just need some reassurance that I'm a good dad and that I'm cared for. And they will respond and they will say, you're a good dad. I also need to be able to have a conversation with my son about how are we going to work this on Friday, because I am going to be there. So I need to be able to have a conversation and say, okay, well, so how can I support you in being able to hang out with your friends and have a good time and still maybe we share the camp together? What can we do to make this work for both of us? And have a conversation with him about it. And he'll be open to that if I do it from a loving place and just do that. So those are some of my choices. I could also just decide that this isn't even worth it and just stay home, which isn't congruent with my value system. So that's not one of my choices. Helpful?
Yeah, actually, it really is. So, yeah, it's just an abject lesson in parenting there. You know, um, and I think an abject lesson in relationships is, a little bit of space is fine, but honesty. What I keep hearing throughout all of this process is that we have to be honest with ourselves about what's going on, about what really happened, how we're reacting, why we're reacting, what the truth is, and what we can do about it. Which it reminds me a lot of kind of steps 4 through 9 of 12-step recovery.
Right.
It's kind of the same process undertaken in a little different way. But do you find that this helps addicts see the truth of their situation when you work this with addicts?
Yes. I have found that it's helpful. I found that it is aligned with a 12-step program, so that works well as well. The thing I love about it the most is that it really it sucks out the shame. The shame shows up whether you're an addict or whether you're a betrayed partner. There's so much shame that really hijacks our ability to connect with each other. And that's really what we need. And at the end of the day, what heals attachment wounds is attachment, being connected. And shame will just ruin that every time. So if we can shine some light on that and see the truth for what it is, it then helps me show up in a way that actually helps me get my needs met and the other person gets their needs met. And when my needs are met, I don't have the desire to go act out. I don't need to go do that.
Okay, looks like we got another. Yeah, one of the paradoxes of Shamon, Brene Brown writes about this is, shame happens between other people and it heals with other people. We can't heal it on our own. And so we have to become vulnerable. So excellent information and worksheet. As a betrayed partner, both in my current and past relationship, I will use this to address my own attachment wounds. I'm catching your cough. And we'll share the webinar replay and worksheet with my husband. I can see how this would be so helpful to him when the shame presents itself. While these times are very painful for me, I know that he is experiencing tremendous pain and suffering when he is sitting in his shame. When this happens, he turns into himself and detaches, which feels like another abandonment to me. I'm sure this process will help us both to see what is happening in a more objective way, which will in turn help us to manage the emotions as they come up. Thank you so much for sharing. I'm going to ask a question here. What is the proper way to share this process with someone who may or may not be receptive in his addiction?
So it's an interesting thing. If you're familiar with Sue Johnson and the infinity loop, which you may or may not be familiar with that, but there's this infinity loop that when I engage in this way, then you engage in this way, and it becomes this loop of disconnection. And what I've been able to do is I put my side of the worksheet is on this side of the loop, and then my partner's side of the worksheet is on this part of the loop. And then as we're sharing that with each other, we're changing the dynamic, and I'm able to actually say, well, this is when you did this is the wound that got stirred up for me, and this is the negative core belief that I'm believing about myself, and what I really need is this. And then the partner says, well, this is what was going on with me, and this is how my negative core, this is what my attachment wound was that was being stirred up, and this is what I was doing to try and cope with it, and it wasn't working, and what I really need is this. And in that process, we're able to look at each other, and I ask, can you see each other's pain? Can you hold space for the other person's pain? It's really hard to do that when I'm just all about me and my pain. I get it. Like if you've hurt yourself, in a way, it's really easy to make it all about you. But in that moment, can you see the other person's pain, and can they see yours? Can you have compassion for their wounds? Can they have compassion for yours? And as you're able to do that with each other, and you share the wound and the story and what you really need, all the other stuff kind of doesn't really matter. The facts really aren't that important. It's what I'm really needing right now is connection. And can I do that for you? How can I help you with that? And so that it's beautiful when it happens, and I've seen it happen, and it's wonderful. To answer your question directly, how do we share that? It would sound something like, I learned about attachment wounds and my own negative core beliefs and how it impacts the way that I behave and respond. And I would love to share that with you because I'm thinking that maybe you do something similar, and then we get caught up in this cycle that ends up hurting us both. And maybe this will help us figure out how to stop that cycle. Would you be interested in learning more about that?
Yeah, I think that's a good approach. I mean, because otherwise we will stay stuck in our dysfunctional relationship dance. We'll just do the same thing over and over because that's all we know how to do. Unless we dig at what's underneath it and figure out what we really need. So,
yeah.
We are pretty much out of time here. So I want to thank Troy for giving us his time. I want to thank everybody for attending. Troy, do you want to say anything to wrap us up and take us out?
No, I'm just grateful for this opportunity to be able to help. I'm glad that some people found it helpful. So.
Troy does have a group on Fridays. You want to tell them about that real quick?
Yep. So I have a men's group that walks us through this worksheet. So the guys check in at the beginning, and then I just ask somebody to volunteer and jump in, and we just walk through the worksheet. And sometimes we have time to do two, and sometimes we have only time to do one. It's very different than the other support groups that are being run on sex and relationship healing. It's more like homework designed, but we are there every Friday morning. So it's been really neat to watch the men do their work.
And this group meets the fourth Wednesday of every month, and there's something at this time, I believe, every week. So
Yep.
tune in next week. I'm not sure who's, maybe we just have four. Anyway, Troy is here the fourth Wednesday of every month. Thank you, everybody, for attending. Thank you, Troy. And some people will see you on Friday, and the rest of us will see you next month.
Sounds good. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Take care. Bye.
Have a good day, everybody.